Hello and welcome. I'm Jenny Hall. Thanks for joining me for another card making tutorial. Today we actually have two projects to complete. I'd like to share a technique with you that uses embossing folders to create a heat embossed image on a card base or as a focal point. It's another way to use those supplies that we already have in our craft stash for something new, and it's really fun too. I'm going to start by creating a background. There's two different ways that I'm using the folders. One is a background and one is as a focal point. So this is going to be our background project. The Simple Stripes embossing folder is just that, exactly, stripes. Now there are hills and valleys on each of the plastic embossing folders. I want to add the ink to the portion that sticks away from the embossing folder, and I will call that the hills. There's another side of the embossing folder that receives the embossed image or a debossed image, and we're not going to do anything with that side. Once my card base has been anti-static proof with my embossing buddy, then I'll use the VersaMark stamp pad to gently dab on the ink onto those hill areas, and then use my hand to apply an even amount of pressure, which is going to transfer that ink over to the card base. I don't expect for all of the stamped lines to be complete or crisp. This is just going to give some gilding, kind of like gold lines, because I'm using gold embossing powder. Then these are going to be gold lines, and they're not solid, but look at what we've got. I really like this look. So let's continue with that thought and create a focal point. Lovely Floral Dynamic embossing folder is different from the first version in the respect that it is a much more detailed embossing folder. So I'm going to use a piece of watercolor paper, and just as we did before, the paper is treated and then the VersaMark is added to the raised portion of the embossing folder. Once I get the paper in the proper place, then I'm going to just press this down with my hands, and because it's a dynamic embossing folder, which means it has a different layer or a different level, then I'm going to add some extra pressure here with something that has a flat edge. My fine tip glue pen, or I can use the bottom of my Tombow glue, just enough to get more even pressure, and those lines of the embossing folders start to emerge on my watercolor paper. It's lovely, and this image was only previously available for me to watercolor if I worked on a piece of embossed paper, but now that image is on a piece of watercolor paper. It's a beautiful thing, folks. So once I have heat set this image, then you can see the sparkle. It's not an overpowering gold glimmer, but it's just enough, and it's going to add something a little bit extra. We're going to finish off that very first piece, which has the stripes on the card base, and I'm using it as a background, and I'm going to add some fall floral colors. Pineapple Punch, Mango Melody, Grapefruit Grove, and Soft Suede are a beautiful color combination. And I'm using the Painted Harvest stamp set. This is not a new stamp set, but it is a favorite stamp set of many of us. It's a two-step stamp set, and I'm taking it a little bit further and doing some of the rock and roll technique, which is to first ink up in a light color and then to roll the stamp onto a darker color, and that will get me a little bit of more dimension on the look of the sunflower. Soft Suede is going to be for the center of the flower and some little dots off to the side for some atmosphere. And I'm going to use the sentiment also in soft suede. Switching over to the greenery, we're using Pear Pizzazz and Mossy Meadow. This is also a two-step stamp, so the lighter of the two colors will be stamped first, and then the details on the leaves will be stamped with the darker of the greens. I like that this stamp set allows me to use many different color combinations, and as long as they will go along with the gold that's in the background, then the possibilities are endless. I wanted this to be a sort of a farmhouse look, or you could say that it looked a little bit like shiplap, or the paneling on a house or siding, whatever you call it. It's a natural but rustic look, and the only way I was able to achieve those stripes was with that embossing folder, which I already had in my craft supply. Finishing off the inside of this card is just going to be another layer of the green, that's Pear Pizzazz, with a stamped leaf that's the same stamp from the front. Moving on to our second project, we're going to add the same exact colors to the watercolor paper. I'll add this in a messy watercolor style, as I believe that the images, the way that they came out on the paper, with it not being a thick and crisp line, that they will work really well with the messy watercolor look. And messy watercolor kind of takes the pressure off of keeping everything inside the lines. So with the same exact color combination, I'm just adding color in just different areas to create a little bit of a dimensional look to the flower. And then I will use the same set of greens on the leaves. I wanted to make the leaves appear a little bit larger than what they actually came off on embossing, so the messy watercolor look was really perfect to elongate and make those leaves a bit more thick and give a little bit more dimension. And this was really a great time for me to color. Watercoloring is something I enjoy very much. Making sure that all of the coloring is dry before I go on, then I'm using the basic black Stampin' Up marker, and I'm flicking the brush end against the inside of the cap to give some tiny splatters of black ink on the actual large flower. And I'll mount this onto a panel, and then this will go onto a card base. I'm going to use the same sentiment, but this time I'm stamping it on a scrap of Pear Pizzazz cardstock, and I'm going to mount that directly over the center of the large floral. And then I'll trim away what is on the right hand edge of the card. This is very simple and just as easy as pie. I really like how these two projects turned out. And I'm using the gold faceted gems to kind of pick up a little bit more of that gold look that is on the heat embossing. I'll move these gems around to a couple of different places until I finally settle on something. But I really like how they work well together. So now I'm thinking about my embossing folders in a whole new way. I'm trying all new ideas with them. I know there are many other techniques, such as adding the ink from a stamp pad to the inside of an embossing folder. I have tried that, and I know that there have been some beautiful results from many different projects that you've created. And I love to see all of your projects. I love to see how you use your craft supplies creatively. There's so many different things we can do with everything we've got. It's just nice whenever we discover something new, and I can't, literally my mind was blown when I came across this. And I immediately knew that I wanted to share it with all of you. I got the inspiration from this project by looking at a project on, I forget where I saw it, but it was a very, very shiny piece of embossed paper. And I thought, well, I like that look, but how about if it were just added on to the paper? And so I started playing with the folders, and this is what we come up with. Something wonderful, and I hope that you are going to try it out. I would love to see what you create with it, and I hope that you share. Thank you all so much for joining me today. You can visit my blog at jennyhalldesign.com, and while there, you can click to subscribe and receive an email for every new project that I create. All of the products are listed that I've used today in the video description that's down below this video box. I hope you have enjoyed this technique, and I will love to bring you more soon. Until then, have a great day.
Thanks for watching the video. See you next time.